Thank you. We love you back. Wow. Are we at the gay games? Is that we still say that was the most memorable night of our lives, speaking on that stage. Wow, thank you. Thank you, Tim, for the introduction. Before we get started, let's thank the servers tonight. Wow, the job they're doing, meandering, weaving through all of us to get to us. Tim mentioned the Pulitzer Prize in one of the columns I wrote, which was about that odious, there were 11 state referendums that year in 2004. We had the worst. We already had a law preventing same-sex marriage. This was like to dig in and to make you feel so unwelcome, right? And I remember the day very well that I wrote about because I wasn't going to write about it initially. We were attending Pilgrim Church at the time, Yay Pilgrim, in large part because two of our closest friends who are with us tonight, Jackie Casera and the Reverend Kate Matthews, who are here tonight. And Kate officiated our marriage, and Jackie was in charge of it, so it worked out really well. But the election in 2004, many of you will remember, you were here, and so we decided we were not going to claim we were going to church every Sunday. We went to church that Sunday because we felt we needed it a lot. We needed to be among people who we knew were as heartbroken as we were with the outcome of the election and the outcome of issue 1. And I remember that Pastor Lori Hafner stood up at one point and she started talking about what had happened. And this is after we had already heard from the choir director who led us in a Latin chant, remember that? And Kate Matthews got up and talked about the need for stewardship. We had another person who got up and talked about the Christmas toy drive that was coming. And then Lori Hafner got up and started talking about issue 1. There was no point in pretending that wasn't on everyone's mind. We were an open and inclusive church. We had a lot of members in our congregation that day who were directly affected. But here's the thing. When she asked who was directly affected, at first, about 50 people stood up, including Kate Matthews, who had just talked to us about annual giving, the man in charge of the toy drive for the children in the neighborhood, and the choir director, who had just led us in the Latin chant. And as Sherrod and I sat there and we started looking around and seeing all these people stand up, about 50, it dawned on not just us, but pretty much everyone in the congregation, if it affects our brothers and sisters, it affects us. And so we all stood up. And it was a moment I've never forgotten. And you'd like to think, after all that, we have had our moments since then, haven't we? The Supreme Court decision was monumental. We stood on the steps of Cleveland City Hall that day, so excited. We were having our moments. We were having our moments for hope. And then Donald Trump became president of the United States. I am telling you, the day after the election at Kent State University in the journalism school, where I'm a professional in residence there, it was triage. I had a line outside my office that ran down the hall, students who wanted to talk to me, many of whom were not my students. And many of them were DACA students, and many of them were from the LGBTQ community. And a few months into the Trump administration, one of my students asked to meet with me, and he closed the door, which I always give them the option if it's something very personal, and he got very emotional, and he said, "Professor, how much longer are we going to have to fight for these basic rights?" And I said to him, "For as long as it takes. That's how long we're going to fight. I don't know how long that fight is." But what I told him that day is still what I believe. As long as I'm drawing a breath, I will be in that fight with you. Sherrod will be in that fight with you, and millions of Americans feel the same way. And one of those millions of Americans is standing right next to me now. Earlier this evening, we were not prepared for that applause, and prolonged applause, and and I looked at my husband, and he was teared up. He was so emotional, and he turned to me and he said, "Why do I get more emotional at these events than anywhere else?" And I said, "Well, first of all, because we've been in this fight with you for so long. But secondly, so many of you we know so well in this. I think I've hugged at least half of you already tonight. You're family to us. I hope we're family to you, because that's how we feel." Now, many of you have heard me tell this story, but I'm going to tell it again because I love making sure that everyone in the room always knows this. Before I would go out with Sherrod, in 2003, I looked up his voting record. I was a longtime single mom, happy enough, and I wish all of you had had the chance to look up the voting record of people before you started dating them, because it would save you. I'm not kidding, it saves you so much time. But he hates that I did that, kind of, don't you? But I don't know what your complaint is, because the rest of the story is very good. So he had to be 100% on two issues. He had to be 100% on choice, and he had to be 100% on gay rights. And that meant that Congressman Sherrod Brown, in a fairly conservative district, voted against DOMA. And the thing I always think about, I was telling him tonight, it's the first time I thought about it this way. He shouldn't be applauded for that in particular, you know what I mean? Because that's the right thing to do. The question is never, will this vote get me reelected? It's, is this vote what I was elected to do? Which is to stand up for what's right. That was our beginning, and I can't begin to express the person who's, in theory, my profession. I mean, I tell stories for a living, and I'm supposed to always have the right words. I have seen what these last 2.5 years have done to so many of you. I've seen what it's done to so many in our country, and I see what it's done to my husband. But our motto, given to me from my book editor several years ago when I started to complain about something, is no whining on the yacht. Look what we get to do. And so I want to say one more thing to all of you, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sherrod. When we come in these events, we have so many of you thanking us for our support, and we're always uncomfortable with that, and here's why. Because we are supposed to support you. Supporting you is supporting us, because you are our community too. Just as I say so often, there is no such thing as just the Black community. It is my community. And there's the LGBTQ community. It is my community. And I am married to a man who lives and breathes that every single day. So, Senator Sherrod Brown.
Thank you. And I am really lucky, so thank you, honey.
You're welcome, honey. We do this because if our kids are watching, it really grosses them out.
Thanks. Thanks to all of you, and Connie, thank you so much for your public spiritedness and love and compassion and always doing the right thing. Connie and I were, as Elizabeth was talking, was filling out the pledge card, and Elizabeth said, you know, some of you have employers that match, and Connie said to me, you think Mitch McConnell would match this? I've asked Mitch McConnell to schedule the background checks bill in the House on the Senate floor. Probably not going to ask him about the pledge, but thank you so much. And I was so taken from the beginning tonight when Connie and I first sat down and the program started with Nathan and Gail, and then later President David and all the other speakers in between, President David and Elizabeth. I was so taken by how right from the start, Gail and Nathan talked about Black Lives Matter, talked about civil rights and worker rights and choice and human rights and all women's rights, all the things that we think about. And Connie at the beginning called out the servers tonight. I met just a moment ago Hollis Laceres. It's his team that did this. And, we forget so often when we think about dignity of work or we think about human rights and civil rights, we forget the jobs that so many people do that don't make a lot of money and trying to, as we're all talking and laughing and they have to figure out who gets the vegan meals and who gets these meals and they're all dodging and doing that. And it's so important to always acknowledge the servers and always acknowledge all of them. And I loved, in the video with Sally Field, I loved what she said, that it's not just government. I mean, so much of what you do is pushing my colleagues in the Senate and the House in Columbus and Washington and in city halls to do the right thing. That's so important. But it's what you do when in the workplace and what you do to get your companies to sponsor and get involved and change their policies. And they're doing that because of you. They don't just all of a sudden altruistically think, we care about justice, we care about human rights, we care about LGBTQ rights, we care about worker rights. It's pushing, it's activism from all of you. And don't ever forget that. While my job is to reflect and vote for and support justice in the workplace and in our homes and in our communities, yours is to continue to push people like me, but it's to continue to do what you're doing in your community. I wanted to say one other thing, and President David got me thinking more and more about this when he said that we're coming for Trump. I was after the Dayton, a number of you have spoken to me about Dayton tonight. Some of you, one of you actually knew the family. Several of you grew up in Dayton. Many of you just because it's our state and they're fellow human beings that were killed mercilessly. In some of these cases because of their race or their immigration status or their gender or their transgender status or all the reasons that people have murdered other people. But I had to wrestle with the decision. I went down there because Nan Whaley, the mayor, asked me to the day of the shooting. It happened at 1 a.m. Connie and I went down there that day, late that morning. But I had to wrestle with, did I want to greet the President of the United States when he came to Dayton? And my first thought was no. I did in no way wanted to endorse his racism, his bigotry, his hate speech, his inability or unwillingness to tell the truth, his lack of empathy, make the list. I didn't want to be part of that. And I talked to Nan Whaley about it, and I talked to Connie about it, and I talked to my kids about it, and I thought, I want to go to that hospital, and I want to see the people that have been injured and meet some of the victims' families. But I wanted to look the President of the United States in the eye and tell him he had to do his job. And to do his job's a lot of things. First of all, to do his job is to publicly say he will support the background check bill and the assault weapon ban and the close the terrorist exemption, and he will promise to sign it. But also to do his job is stop dividing Americans, stop calling people's names, stop the bigotry, and stop the racism. And so what I want to ask you tonight is one thing. Be ready for 2020. I'm not on the ballot again for a long time, so this is not that long a time, but 4 or 5 years. But what I want to talk about is start tonight. I met a number of young people here tonight, some in college, some in high school. One young lady, I think she said she went to Lakewood High School, and she's only a junior, and she doesn't turn 18 until after November of 2020. But she's already starting a voter registration drive. So all of you have children, grandchildren, nephews, nieces, young people you know at work, young people in your neighborhood. And I'd like to ask you tonight to start thinking about young people whom you know. If they vote, they will vote Donald Trump out of office, if they vote. But how important it is, and I'd like to ask each of you to start thinking about 5 people whom you know who are young, who may be not so likely to vote unless you talk to them. Talk to them about civil rights. Talk to them about LGBTQ rights. Talk to them about the environment. Talk to them about climate change. Talk to them about minimum wage. Talk to them about being able to afford community college. Talk to them about issues that affect them and affect you. And just keep in mind over the next 14, 15 months, those 5 people. And if you do that, we will change this country. And Ohio is increasingly hard for a Democrat to win. But we can do that. We can do that if you're engaged. And I'll close with this. My favorite Dr. King quote was, he said, progress doesn't roll in on the wheels of inevitability. Progress doesn't roll in on the wheels of inevitability. It rolls in because we make sure that it rolls in. That's what HRC is so good at. That's clearly what President David already is so good at. It's the way you do things in this community. It's what we do in this state. It's what we all do as supporters of human rights and civil rights. Thank you so much.